Sophia Loren was the kind of woman who made the world pause. Her beauty was legendary, her talent undeniable. And yet, for all the men who adored her, she only ever truly loved one, Carlo Ponti. Their love began in silence, endured through scandal, survived exile, and outlasted fame. And when he passed in 2007, Sophia made a quiet, heartbreaking decision. She would never love another. For years, fans wondered why she stayed alone, why the woman who had once dazzled Hollywood and Rome alike chose solitude. Now, at 90, Sophia Loren is finally ready to answer that question. It's a glimpse into a kind of love that doesn't end when a person dies. A love that doesn't need replacing, because it was never broken. She was just 15, an awkward, wide-eyed girl living in a war-torn Italy that was still reeling from the devastation of World War II. He was 37, a successful, respected film producer more than twice her age. When Sophia Loren first met Carlo Ponti, she had no idea her life was about to change forever. It started with a beauty contest. Sophia, then known by her birth name Sophia Loren, entered for the chance to earn some money and maybe open a door into the world of film. Carlo Ponti was a judge that day, and though there was no romance, at least not yet, there was something else. He saw her, not just her face, not just her figure, but her spark, her ambition. He saw the strength inside her that she was still learning to recognize. And slowly, quietly, he stepped into her life, not as a suitor, but as a mentor. Carlo began guiding her career. He helped her choose her stage name. He introduced her to directors, taught her how to navigate an industry that devoured young women. He saw what Sophia could become before the rest of the world did. And Sophia, she trusted him, not just because he gave her opportunity, but because he listened, protected her, believed in her. At a time when many men wanted to exploit her beauty, Carlo treated her with reverence. That quiet, respectful loyalty laid the foundation for something deeper, something more dangerous. They fell in love. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a whirlwind. It was slow, steady, real, and, at first, completely hidden from the public eye, because Carlo Ponti was still married. Not unhappily, not romantically, but legally, and in 1950s Italy, divorce was not permitted under Catholic law. If they were discovered, the consequences could be devastating for both of them. But Sophia didn't run. She didn't chase someone more available, more convenient. Instead, she waited, and she loved him quietly. By her early 20s, Sophia had become a star across Europe and was beginning to break into Hollywood. But behind the scenes, her life was built around stolen moments with Carlo. Private dinners, secret letters, shared promises no one else heard. It was a love that demanded sacrifice from the very beginning. A love that forced her to choose not just between two men, but between a man and the rest of the world. Because as her fame grew, so did the offers. There were glamorous actors who tried to win her over, industry insiders who offered everything. But Sophia stayed close to the one person who had seen her when no one else did. Looking back, it would have been easier to walk away, easier to avoid the legal mess, easier to choose someone else. But she didn't, and that decision, made in her teens, would define the rest of her life. By the late 1950s, Sophia Loren was no longer just an up-and-coming actress. She was a global star. Her roles in Italian neo-realist films had captivated Europe, and Hollywood soon came calling. She stood alongside legends like Cary Grant, Clark Gable, and Frank Sinatra. But while cameras flashed and scripts piled up, her heart belonged to one man, Carlo Ponti. And yet, their love remained in the shadows. Because Carlo was still married, and in the eyes of Italian law and the Catholic Church, there was no way out. Divorce was illegal in Italy. Not difficult, illegal. And that meant Sophia, a devout Catholic and a proud Italian, was caught in an impossible place. In love with a man she could never marry. But they tried. In 1957, desperate for a life together, Carlo and Sophia married by proxy in Mexico. Carlo secured a divorce there, and they wed without even being physically present. Two lawyers stood in for them during the ceremony. It was legal in Mexico, but it didn't take long for the consequences to catch up with them back home. The Italian government refused to recognize the marriage. Worse, Carlo was now considered a bigamist, and both he and Sophia faced charges. If convicted, they could be sentenced to prison. And the Vatican condemned them both. The church excommunicated them, cutting them off from their spiritual community. It was humiliating, painful, public, and still Sophia didn't walk away. While tabloids speculated and critics sneered, she held firm. She stayed in exile with Carlo in France, away from the place she loved most, Rome. She had sacrificed everything. Her home, her faith, her reputation, all for the right to be with the man she loved. And Carlo, he knew what she was giving up. He didn't push, he didn't demand, but he never stopped fighting either. To finally clear their names and secure a future together, Carlo made a dramatic move. He applied for French citizenship. It was the only way to obtain a legal divorce from his first wife. And once that was granted, he and Sophia were married legally in France in 1966. No more proxies, no more secrets. This time it was real and it was recognized. But the cost had been enormous. Sophia had spent nearly a decade hiding her love, living in limbo, watching her every step. She had been shamed by the church and hounded by reporters. And still, she said she never once considered leaving Carlo, because this wasn't just about romance. It was about loyalty, about fighting for something deeper than passion. In a world where relationships came and went with each film contract, Sophia and Carlo were something else, something rare. They were a promise. And now, finally married, they could begin again. But for Sophia, the pain of those years never disappeared. It lingered in the background, a quiet reminder of how much they'd had to give up just to be together. And yet, they never once regretted it. Because sometimes love isn't about ease or timing or approval. Sometimes it's about standing in the fire and not letting go. With their marriage finally recognized, Sophia Loren and Carlo Ponti could begin living openly as husband and wife. But unlike many high-profile couples in Hollywood, their life together wasn't marked by red carpet theatrics or tabloid drama. It was grounded, private, and fiercely loyal, an almost unthinkable combination for two people living in the heart of the entertainment industry. Sophia's fame continued to soar. She became the first actress to win an Oscar for a foreign-language film, Two Women, in 1962. A performance so raw and haunting it stunned audiences worldwide. Roles poured in. Directors clamored for her. She worked alongside Marlon Brando, Gregory Peck, Paul Newman, and Richard Burton. And yet, through it all, Sophia remained completely devoted to Carlo. He wasn't just her husband. He was her protector, her anchor, and in many ways, the quiet architect of her career. He didn't dominate or control her. Instead, he guided her, advised her, and gave her the freedom to rise while still knowing she was safe. And Sophia? She made choices that few stars in her position would have dared. When Hollywood called again and again, she answered selectively. She didn't relocate permanently. She didn't chase the limelight. She built a home in Geneva with Carlo, far from the chaos of studio lots. Because for Sophia, real life was not found on set. It was found in their home, their kitchen, their long walks together in the garden. They welcomed two sons, Carlo Jr., who became a conductor, and Eduardo, a director. Family life became the core of Sophia's world. She cooked, she gardened, she read. And when she wasn't acting, she was simply living. In a world where fame often becomes a personality, Sophia never let it replace who she really was. There were temptations, of course. The movie industry offered flirtations and opportunities that could have easily lured her away. But Sophia never strayed. In fact, one of the most famous love triangles in Hollywood history involved her, without ever truly involving her. While filming Houseboat in 1957, Sophia starred opposite Cary Grant. The chemistry on screen was undeniable, and off-screen, Grant fell in love. He reportedly asked Sophia to marry him, even while Carlo's divorce was still unresolved. And yet, she said no. Later, she would explain, "It would have been easy to fall for Cary. He was charming, elegant, and gentle. But I was in love with Carlo. That moment revealed everything about Sophia's heart. Where most might have chosen ease, glamour, or safety, she chose the man who had waited in the shadows with her. The man who had endured scandal at her side. The one who knew her before the world did, and loved her anyway. As years passed, their bond only deepened. They traveled together, raised their sons, and lived out a love that quietly defied the glittering expectations around them. There were no dramatic separations, no betrayals, no tabloid headlines, just one long, steady commitment. And behind closed doors, Sophia often spoke of Carlo not as her husband, but as her home. To those who knew them, it wasn't surprising that after Carlo passed, she never sought companionship again. Not because she was broken, but because she had already had what most people never find. A love worth growing old with. And as her career slowed and the cameras faded, Sophia held onto that love. Not as a memory, but as something still living in her heart. Carlo Ponti passed away on January 10, 2007, at the age of 94. He died quietly in Geneva, surrounded by the family he had built with Sophia Loren, the woman who had stood by his side for more than 5 decades. For most people, his passing was a headline, a moment of recognition for a famous producer. But for Sophia, it was the end of everything. To the public, she made no dramatic statement. There was no tearful press conference, no memoir of grief, no televised tribute, only silence. Because Sophia Loren doesn't express her heartbreak with words. She never has. Those closest to her say the loss hit her like a storm, but one that moved quietly, flooding her spirit without ever making a scene. For weeks, she didn't take calls. She avoided cameras. She withdrew from everything except her sons. The sparkle that had once lit her eyes on every red carpet was dimmed. Not gone, but changed. Carlo had been her beginning, her middle, and, in a way, her ending. They had faced nearly every challenge a couple could endure. Legal threats, religious condemnation, long-distance separations, career demands, and personal tragedies. But through it all, they had never betrayed each other, never publicly faltered, and never stopped choosing one another. So when he was gone, it wasn't just grief Sophia carried. It was a quiet refusal to start over. A silent vow that this chapter of love would be her last. And it wasn't just symbolic. Over the years, there were whispers, questions asked in interviews about whether she would ever consider loving again. Her answer every time was some variation of, "I already had the best. Why would I need more?" She didn't date, didn't entertain the idea of companionship. She wasn't bitter. She wasn't broken. She was simply done. Because for Sophia, Carlo had never left her. He was still in the home they built together. Still in the sound of their children's voices. Still in the way she smiled when no one was looking. And in that silence, the kind only real grief can bring, Sophia seemed to carry something sacred. A love so complete, so deeply rooted, that it didn't need to be replaced. Friends who visited her during that time said she spoke of Carlo as if he had just stepped out of the room. She still made his favorite dishes, still referenced his opinions, still held space for his memory in every corner of her life. Because that's what devotion looks like when it isn't performative. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's soft, steady, undeniable. The kind of love that doesn't make headlines, but leaves a lasting mark. And maybe that's why her silence said so much. Sophia didn't need to tell the world how much she missed him. She didn't need to broadcast her pain. All she had to do was live without him, and never once try to fill the space he left behind. That was her final gesture. Not a memorial, not a statue, not a book, just the simple, steady choice to never love again. And in that silence, fans began to understand what they'd always suspected. This wasn't just a Hollywood love story. It was the kind of love that stays alive even after goodbye. Sophia Loren has had countless roles in her life. International movie star, wife, mother, beauty icon, and cultural ambassador. But in the years since Carlo Ponti's death, she's quietly stepped into one more role. Keeper of the love they built together. She has never remarried, never sought out a new partner, never hinted at the possibility of doing so. And while the world might expect loneliness or regret from a woman who spent her later years without a spouse, Sophia's choices tell a different story. One of peace, clarity, and an unwavering bond that didn't end with death. She has spoken only sparingly about Carlo in the years since his passing. But when she does, the language is simple and unshakable. She describes him as her everything, her safe place, her forever. When asked in one interview why she never remarried, she answered plainly, "Because when you have had the perfect husband, why would you want someone else?" There was no bitterness in her tone, no sadness, just certainty. Because for Sophia, love wasn't about companionship. It wasn't about filling space. It was about connection, the kind that doesn't fade when a person disappears from view. Carlo had given her more than affection or partnership. He had given her belief when she had nothing, stability when she was surrounded by chaos, respect when the world tried to reduce her to a face and a figure. And in return, Sophia gave him her loyalty. For life. There's something almost radical in that now. In a world that moves fast, heals fast, and replaces fast, Sophia never moved on, because in her heart she never needed to. Some might say that's tragic. But to those who understand her, it's beautiful. A reflection of a woman who lived according to her own rules, even in love. She didn't follow the industry path of serial romances and brief marriages. She didn't try to escape the pain by chasing distractions. She stayed rooted in what they had shared because to her it was enough. Even into her 80s, Sophia's days remained filled. She surrounded herself with her sons, her grandchildren, her memories. She cooked. She read. She still appeared at occasional events, radiating grace and strength. But the sparkle in her eye was always a little softer, the joy a little quieter. She has said that grief never leaves, it just changes shape. And in her case, it became something sacred. The space beside her remained empty not because no one could fill it, but because it was never meant to be filled again. In an age where love stories often begin and end with headlines, Sophia Loren gave the world something different. Something rarer, something more real. She loved one man. She built a life with him. And when he was gone, she carried that love forward alone, not with sorrow, but with pride. Because she had already found what so many people spend their entire lives searching for. And once you've found that, there's no second chapter. Only memory, only devotion, only the quiet dignity of loving someone so completely that the story never needs rewriting. Sophia Loren never shouted her love from rooftops. She didn't chase fairy tales or beg the world to notice. Instead, she lived a quiet kind of romance, built not on spectacle, but on loyalty, sacrifice, and a promise she never broke. Her love story with Carlo Ponti didn't play out like a movie. It was slower, harder, deeper, and when he was gone, she didn't start over. Because some loves don't end. They simply live on, softly, steadily, in the background of everything that follows. Sophia Loren could have chosen anyone, but she chose him, again and again, through exile, through scandal, through fame, and through grief. And by never remarrying, by never replacing him, she told the world, without saying a word, that her love didn't need a sequel. It already said everything. For more emotional stories, check out this video.